Hello, and welcome to today's edition of Talking to a Biologist. Today we're with Dr. Steve Whyard of the Department of Biological Sciences here at the University of Manitoba. Welcome, Dr. Whyard.
Hello.
So, tell us first a little bit about yourself. What brought you here to the University of Manitoba?
Well, before I came here, I was working in Australia for about 10 years for my postdoc. And we had a kid, and it was time to come home. The family started clamoring, so I started looking for jobs. And this department had a job that was looking ideal, so I applied, and I was lucky enough to get it.
There you go. And so what sort of things were you working on in Australia? The same sort of organisms, and can you do that across, time zones and different sides of the world?
Not entirely. While I was there, I worked on a lot of different organisms. I worked with insects, mostly, but then I started to diverge and worked with prawns or shrimp, oysters, fish, plants, and I was in a biotechnology program. So what I've done when I came back here was try to translate some of that biotechnology and apply it to some species that we have here. And so one of my key species of interest are mosquitoes, because when I realized that Manitoba is plagued with them, I figured that that's a good place to start.
So what sort of work are you doing now on our lovely, the Manitoba bird of prey, the mosquito?
I'm looking at ways to get rid of them, which should please many people. Not everybody, interestingly. But what we're looking at are ways to control mosquito populations in urban settings. No intention to get rid of them entirely from the ecosystem. But we're looking at new methods of control that don't rely on the current repertoire of pesticides. Most of the pesticides we use today, including the stuff that's sprayed around the city, is a neurotoxin that poisons many species, including us. We're just lucky enough to get low doses. But what I'd like to do is develop new pesticides that are more species specific. So we're looking at the genes of the mosquitoes and trying to identify those key genes that we can target. And we're actually developing pesticides that actually target the genetic machinery of the animal. And that way we can knock down a species because we can pick those sequences that are unique to just a mosquito or even just one particular species of mosquito if we choose to.
So it's a bioweapon, but on an insect instead of a human.
That's right. Yeah, we wouldn't want to kill people, but we certainly can take that technology and apply it to a lot of other pests. So I do have other research interests that look at other pest animals. I'm working with Dr. Margaret Docker on a project that will try to control sea lampreys in the Great Lakes. And we can see that this technology could be applied to a whole range of other species, not just insects. Although right now our focus is on insects because, one, they're easy to deliver these pesticides to them, and it's also, I think, of medical importance to start to look at some of these disease vectors around this area.
So could this sort of same technology be then applied to the malaria problem in Africa and places like that?
Yeah, that's our hope. We hope that what we can do is start with the local species here and show that the technology works, and then extend it to other mosquito species. So I'll be talking with the people at the National Microbiology Laboratory to get up some links to work with the people in Africa and look if we can tackle some of those big mosquito problems like malaria or dengue. That's the other second big killer.
So if you're doing research on mosquitoes, do you have to keep a culture of mosquitoes going, or do you just have to wait every summer to get some, or where do you have a storage of mosquitoes?
Oh, I'm not a patient person, so we keep them in our laboratory or actually in an animal housing facility so that we can get at them all through the year. I don't want to wait for the summers to get them.
So here's my next question. What do you feed them? Are you looking for undergraduate assistants to maybe put their arm into a cage, or how do we feed the mosquitoes?
No, we feed them through artificial membranes. So we just get some blood from an animal and put it into these little plastic bags, and they'll bite through the bag. Now, there are a few of the guys in the lab who like to impress each other with how many bites they can take, but I only know one of those that has succeeded without showing any signs of scratching afterwards. So I wouldn't encourage it.
So speaking of encouragement, if you were talking to a first-year biology student, and that's what we're doing here today, when did you first get interested in science in the whole, and what advice would you have for a first-year biology student who's interested in questions around science and not really sure where they're going?
Well, I guess I started my interest back in primary school, and I liked science because I think what it did was tried to answer questions that I had about nature and life, and I've kind of followed that pursuit all the way through. And what I find now is that the field of biology is huge, and there are so many questions out there. There are lots of things to study, so you almost have to decide what's your favorite question or what's your favorite beast that you want to study. And I've kind of spread those questions around. I call myself a geneticist because I kind of like to look at these broad-scale questions from right down to the molecule all the way up to the animal and look at the phenotype. And then being a geneticist, I like to tinker with the genes and change them. So if you're interested in those kinds of questions about how does life work, how do these organisms survive, why do they look the way they do, how do they cope with their environment, and all the cool little things that they do to adapt to their lifestyle, then I'd say biology is a great discipline. It also is a good launching pad if you're interested in getting into applied science like medicine, that if you start in our program, I think you have a good chance of developing a whole lot of tools that could be useful for medicine. And in fact, many of my projects have medical applications. I'm not just interested in mosquito control, but I look at insects as models for disease. In fact, we have fruit flies that have an Alzheimer's type of phenotype. They can't remember what to do. And we're using them as our study. And of course, you can do a whole lot of cool experiments with a fly that you can't do with a person. So they're a good starting place. And I encourage students to look to our department if you're interested in molecular biology. Don't just look to microbiology for an opportunity to study molecular biology, but look to our department because we've got a number of people, not just me, that are looking at the molecular questions and using molecular genetics as our tools.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Whyard, and now we'll return you to your regular scheduled lecture. But remember this, Department of Biological Science, not microbiology. Thank you very much.